Have you ever considered that merely stopping the effort to please people could end your anxiety, your feeling of worthlessness, and that never-ending fatigue? The cause of that deep unrest that keeps you awake at night is not what others do to you, but the unlimited permission you give them. It wasn't hard work that exhausted you. The real reason for your fatigue is the heavy, good person mask you've worn on your face for years. You are tired of saying yes to everyone, tearing pieces off yourself so that no one gets hurt, and swallowing your own truths just to be loved. And if you still wonder today why you don't get the respect you deserve, look not at the ingratitude of people, but at your excessive self-sacrifice born of the fear of setting boundaries. Because sometimes, the greatest betrayal a person can commit against themselves is to live for the approval of others. Therefore, true strength is not being loved by everyone, but being able to respect yourself. This video was prepared for you to shed the burden of making everyone happy from your shoulders. It is time to use your energy to build your own character instead of consuming it to gain the approval of others. Because every day you live for others is a day you betray yourself. Now, to declare this new stance to your mind and subconscious, write this sentence in the comments. My worth is determined by my own character, not the approval of others. This sentence will be the first step towards your liberation from voluntary servitude, because what you believe in eventually becomes what you live. As Marcus Aurelius said, man's happiness depends on the choices made by his own soul. If you're ready, we're breaking the chains. 1. Stop trying to please people. You might think that going along with everyone, not upsetting anyone, and saying yes to every request makes you a good person. It might feel comforting to believe that this accommodating attitude will return to you as love and appreciation. However, when you constantly try to please others, you unconsciously destroy your own personality. Constantly shaping yourself according to the wishes of others gradually fades your own truths and values. And over time, you become a mere extra in a life that isn't yours. Thus, the approval of others becomes the center of who you are. If they are happy, you feel valuable. If they are uneasy, you feel guilty. You completely surrender control of your own mood to the outside. The point here is not to be unhelpful or to become selfish. The point is not to make self-sacrifice a way of life merely because of the fear of rejection and the hunger for approval. Because with every compromise you make, that feeling of worthlessness inside you deepens further. It turns into a more permanent belief. Your sacrifices are merely duties. They are not your character. But if you constantly perform them, you gradually become someone in the eyes of others who has no boundaries and is always available. Some people feel they absolutely must give up their own wishes to maintain a relationship. At first, this seems like a sacrifice. But over time, you see that they have become dependent on this submission. Being needed by others gives them a kind of reason for existence. They fear they won't be loved or will be abandoned if they say no. They feel safe when approved, and this gradually turns into a toxic cycle. Every yes they utter, every objection they swallow, ties them more tightly to their own prison. Because if their worth is always at the mercy of others, then they have no backbone of their own left. But what if you did the exact opposite? What if you started respecting your own boundaries instead of trying to please everyone? If you made less room for demands that harm you, and more room for your own goals? If you changed your priority, how would your self-respect be right now? You don't have to clash with everyone. We are not talking about abandoning kindness. The point is to raise your consciousness and realize that saying no is not an act of aggression, but an act of boundary protection. Because the boundary you protect becomes your self-respect. If you constantly think, let's not spoil the mood, you build an empire of fear in your mind. This is like tearing a piece of your own power every day and giving it to others. But when you start choosing what you will accept and what you won't, what you will allocate time to and what you won't, your energy changes. Your stance shifts from a beggar to a demander. You start seeing yourself as valuable, and strangely, everyone else notices this and treats you accordingly. Most of the time, we believe that being accommodating makes us more likable. But actually, We often do this because we lack the courage to face conflict. It is easier to say you are there for everyone, that you don't hurt anyone, than to face the fear of being alone. Because a true stance requires daring to be alone, accepting criticism, and most importantly, standing firm. And this is difficult. That's why people tend to suppress their own desires and conform to the crowd. However, if you truly want to be free, empowered, and find peace, you must stop trying to ingratiate yourself and start being yourself. Stoicism teaches us to control our own will, not the outside world. And there is always one thing under your control: how much permission you give to whom. Epictetus says, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and dull by outsiders. If every day you do what they say, you live their life. But if, even under pressure, you say, this is not suitable for me, your mind gradually begins to conform to that authority. Therefore, start choosing your reactions more carefully. Not because you have to make anyone happy, but because protecting your own mental health is your greatest responsibility. Perhaps you cannot change how people view you immediately, but you can change your own stance. And believe me, this is the only power that determines how people treat you. When you focus on your own values, your own time, and your own truths, the fake crowd around you will begin to disperse. Those who leave will leave, and those who stay will be the real companions who respect your boundaries. Not because people changed, but because you decided to stop being a doormat and stand firm like a castle. Therefore, stop trying to please people. Start building your own character, then stand tall and just watch. 2. Your boundaries teach people how to treat you. The way people in your life treat you is not a coincidence or by chance. It is a direct result of the silent permissions you have given them over the years and the boundaries you failed to set. If you constantly show someone that you are available under all circumstances, you are actually teaching them that your time is worthless. When you set aside your own needs and rush to their slightest request, you send the message that your priorities don't matter. People accept the treatment you offer them. If you do not respect yourself and protect your own space, you cannot expect others to do it spontaneously. Because the world is built on filling voids. If you retreat, others will occupy that space. Often, when people are overly self-sacrificing, they hope that the other party will one day notice and reciprocate with the same kindness. However, human psychology does not work like that. As you stretch your boundaries, the person across from you begins to see it not as a favor, but as a right they have earned. A behavior that was first thanked becomes an expectation when repeated, and a blame when not done. The thing that gives people the courage to treat you badly is often not their wickedness, but your tolerance for it. When you swallow an act of disrespect, you are actually giving that person a visa to do it again. When you smile despite being hurt, you teach them that there is no cost to hurting you. At this point, seeking the culprit only outside is a delusion according to the Stoic point of view. Because the one who leaves the door open and the one who enters are in the same equation. The real power that determines how people treat you is what you tolerate. If you are constantly abused in a relationship, a work environment, or a family setting, the question you should ask is, where did I give them this courage? What behavior of mine made them think they could disregard me? Setting a boundary is not about throwing people out of your life. Setting a boundary is about showing people the rules they must follow to have a healthy relationship with you. When you clarify these rules, some may react to them. They may accuse you of selfishness or walk away. However, this is not a loss, but a filter. The space occupied by someone who does not respect your boundaries is already a burden. Real character building begins with not giving up your own truths so that the comfort of others is not disturbed. You will see that as you straighten your stance, the person across from you also falls into line. Because people are forced to respect individuals who have clear boundaries, who know what they want, and who have their own principles, whether they want to or not. Respect is not something demanded. It is a castle built with stance. If you open the gates of that castle completely to everyone, you should not be surprised if the values inside are plundered. From today, observe your relationships like a teacher, with every reaction, every answer, and every silence. You are teaching the other person how to love you, how to address you, and where to stop. If you are being made to feel worthless, it's time to change the curriculum. Now, stop being compliant, stop managing, and stop constantly tolerating, because as you treat yourself, the universe and people will line up to treat you the same way. Remember, no one can do more to you than you allow. Your boundaries are your honor. Protect them. Don't offer explanations for your decisions. When you say no to someone or choose your own path, do you feel the need to immediately list pages of excuses? Most people feel obligated to defend themselves to the other party, even for the simplest decision about their own lives. As if not wanting to go somewhere, rejecting an offer, or simply wanting to be alone is a crime. They try to base it on a valid reason. However, the danger you don't realize is this. The more you explain your decisions, the more you weaken your authority. Because trying to justify a decision sends this message to the subconscious: I am not sure about this decision, and I need your approval. As you explain, you give the other person the right to judge and even change your decisions. For example, if you say you don't have time, or you're tired instead of just saying you don't want to when refusing an invitation, the person across from you starts offering solutions that will refute these excuses. They will create time. They will downplay your fatigue and corner you. Offering an explanation is leaving the door ajar, and the manipulation that enters through that door drags you to a yes answer you don't want. However, your boundaries are not open to discussion. You do not need a jury from someone else for your dispositions over your own life. This constant effort to justify oneself actually feeds on a deep sense of guilt. Minds programmed to please people feel selfish the moment they prioritize their own desires. Therefore, they take refuge in apologies and explanations to alleviate the moral weight created by saying no. If the other party is convinced, their conscience will be at ease. But a Stoic stance does not put the scale of conscience in the hands of others. If the decision you made is in line with your values and truths, you don't need anyone to say, "You are right." What is right because it is true, not because it is approved. Unnecessary explanations diminish the value of your words. A self-assured person speaks little and concisely. Taking refuge in a clutter of words is the clearest sign of internal insecurity. There is a world of difference between explaining a situation and making excuses for a situation. Explaining informs. Making excuses tries to convince. As you try to convince people, you actually compromise your own worth. As an adult, you are not obliged to give an account to anyone for your choices. Your word "no" is a complete sentence on its own and does not need a supporting excuse to be added to it. From today, abandon this defense mechanism. When you make a decision, state it clearly and do not be afraid of the deep silence that follows. That silence is the seal of your determination. When you don't explain, people may be surprised at first, or even find you cold. However, this clarity increases their respect for you in the long run, because no one trusts someone who constantly makes excuses, squirms, and beats around the bush. But someone who knows what they want, stands firm behind their decisions, and does not beg for approval always inspires confidence. Throw your excuses in the trash. Just protect your stance. Be more. Don't pretend to be something you're not for approval. Think about those moments when you nodded your head to opinions you didn't actually agree with, just so the atmosphere wouldn't get tense. The person across from you wouldn't be offended, or you wouldn't be excluded as someone who thinks differently. Most people see this as a sign of courtesy or conformity. However, in reality, hiding your thoughts and approving things you don't believe in is a crime of honesty against yourself. When you act like a chameleon that takes on the color of every environment, you actually become invisible. Someone who agrees with everyone, smiles at everything said, and never shows their own color has no identity of their own left. People may like you, but they will never deeply respect you, because they see not a real person in front of them, but merely a mirror reflecting them. This artificial effort to conform creates a massive conflict in your inner world. You feel anger towards yourself because you swallow your own truths inside while distributing smiles outside. This anger accumulates over time and makes you passive-aggressive, intolerant, and unhappy. Stoics argue that truth is more valuable than any artificial peace. If you don't agree with a thought, you shouldn't be afraid to state it within the bounds of respect. Conflict is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is necessary for the truth to emerge and for the parties to truly know each other. An honest disagreement is much healthier than an artificial atmosphere of peace, because artificial peace is like rotten ground on which nothing can be built. When you don't express your own opinions, you are actually throwing away the most original contribution you can offer to the world. Perhaps your no will correct a mistake in the environment. Perhaps your different perspective will illuminate a truth no one else can see at that moment. But when you stay silent and approve, you deprive both yourself and the person across from you of this potential. The shapes you take, the masks you wear to please people, stick to your face after a while, and when you take off the mask, you can't recognize your own face underneath. A person who forgets to hear their own voice is condemned to be lost in the noise of others. Courage is not a virtue shown only on battlefields. The real courage is to dare to be alone in a room where everyone says yes and say, "I don't think so." This outburst may not make you popular at that moment. It may even bother some. However, in the long run, it forms the backbone of your character. People take seriously not the leaves that scatter with every wind, but the rocks that stand firm even in a storm. When you stand behind your own truths, even those who don't like you begin to trust you, because they know that the words coming from you are not an effort to ingratiate, but an expression of a truth. From today, stop pretending in conversations and relationships. Do not laugh at a joke you don't understand. Do not approve of an idea you don't believe in. Do not look eager to go somewhere you don't want to go. Let it seem inconsistent. Let there be silence sometimes, or let the tension rise. This tension is much more honorable than a false intimacy. When you speak your own truth, the crowd around you may decrease, but the quality of those who remain by your side increases. Because now the people who are with you are those who love you for who you are, not for the role you play. Remember, a friendship gained by giving up your own character is actually the greatest loss. 5. You don't have to be anyone's savior. When someone around you is unhappy, angry, or troubled, do you immediately take it upon yourself and feel obligated to fix it? People pleasers perceive every negative emotion in the environment as a call made to them, as if the peace of your loved ones is your responsibility. You scramble to solve their problems or exert yourself to boost their mood. However, trying to take away the pain, disappointment, or difficulty felt by others is not compassion, but a boundary violation. Every person needs to learn their own life lessons, pay the price for their own mistakes, and live their own emotional processes. When you intervene and try to solve every problem, you take away their opportunity for growth. Seeing yourself as a savior, a firefighter rushing to everyone's aid, might satisfy your ego, but it consumes your soul. Because while trying to quell the storms in others' lives, you don't realize that your own ship is taking on water. There is a huge difference between listening to a friend's troubles and owning that trouble and being more upset than your friend that night. In the first case, you offer support. In the second, you are poisoned. Stoics say that we should not worry about things we cannot control. Another person's inner world, decisions and feelings are outside your sphere of control. It is not in your hands to make them happy. Happiness is everyone's own internal production. No matter how hard you try, you cannot make someone who chooses to be unhappy laugh. This excessive sense of responsibility is actually based on a hidden arrogance. Thinking that you can fix everything, that you can heal everyone, is an overreaching thought. If you want to help people, you should make room for them to learn to fish instead of giving them fish. But if you try to hold the fishing rod for them, those people become dependent on you. While you are exhausted from fatigue, they also forget how to stand on their own 2 feet. Your helpfulness turns into their helplessness, and at the end of the day, you start blaming yourself for every problem you couldn't solve. Yet that problem was not yours to begin with. Trying to manage the emotions of others is an impossible battle. When someone frowns at you, instead of immediately panicking and wondering what you did wrong, You must accept that they might just be having a bad day. Everyone's emotions belong to themselves, and people must take responsibility for their own emotions. If an adult is sending you the bill for their unhappiness, it is their immaturity, not your inadequacy. When you stop seeing yourself as a servant responsible for the happiness of others, the suffocating heaviness in your relationships disappears. You no longer have to think for people or feel for them. From today, take off that invisible cloak. Witness people's pain. Show them compassion. But don't shoulder that pain and take it home. Let people fall. Let them make mistakes. Let them find their way out of their own dilemmas. This does not mean you don't love them. On the contrary, it shows your respect for their ability to discover their own strength. As long as you stop watering your own garden and run to put out the fire in your neighbor's garden, only thorns will grow in your soil. Protecting your own peace is not selfishness, but the healthiest, most balanced version you can offer to others. 6. Don't turn kindness into a secret trade. The biggest misconception of people pleasers is that they believe they are infinitely generous and self-sacrificing. However, when you delve deeper, a secret trade often lies beneath this excessive giving. While you constantly help others, you are actually signing a silent contract with them. I sacrifice myself for you. In return, you must love me, never leave me, and guess my feelings. This is not kindness. It is manipulation. You keep a debt book that the other party is not even aware of. You write down every sacrifice you make in that book, and at the end of the day, you expect to collect payment. The deep anger and accusation of ingratitude you feel when the expected attention or appreciation doesn't come is the biggest proof that your giving was not innocent. These secret agreements are a silent poison that slowly rots your relationships from within. While people think the kindness you offer them is a heartfelt gift, in your inner world, you accumulate resentment by thinking, I worked my fingers to the bone for him, but he didn't even lift a finger for me. Yet no one asked you to sacrifice yourself. You chose this role. Trying to charge others for the compromises you willingly made is an injustice. People cannot read minds. If you don't clearly state how tired you are or what you gave up, they cannot know. Expecting unstated needs to be met and sulking when they are not is the behavior model of a child seeking attention, not an adult. True virtue and kindness are actions done without calculating what will be received in return. Stoics use the sun as an example. The sun does not expect prayers from anyone to shine, does not send bills, or stop rising when not thanked. It shines by its very nature and fulfills its function. If you are going to do a good deed, do it only because it is the right thing to do. If you are going to help someone, do it because it comes from your heart, not to beg for love. If you expect a pat on the back or a debt after your action, it is better for both you and the other party not to do that action at all. Because everything given with expectation is putting an invisible leash around the neck of the person who receives it. The effort to please people is actually a control mechanism. The thought, I will be so good that no one can reject me, no one can hurt me, is a naive defense strategy. But life doesn't work that way. No matter how giving you are, people can still leave, still make mistakes, and still hurt you. Seeing your actions as a guarantee only increases your disappointment. When you stop using giving as a tool for control, that heavy burden on you is lifted. You no longer feel obliged to pay a price to be loved. From today, close that invisible ledger of accounts receivable and payable. Stop doing things while keeping a score. Do it if you feel like it, don't if you don't. Do not tie the value you give to someone to the return they will give you. This turns you from an emotional merchant into a free character. The person who can act without expecting reciprocity is the strongest person in the world. Because their happiness is not mortgaged to the reactions of others, let your kindness be free. Only then will you truly be good. 7. Overcome the fear of being misunderstood. Do you feel like your world is collapsing when someone frowns at you, criticizes you, or makes a negative comment about you? For people-pleasing minds, not being loved is perceived as an almost fatal danger. Losing even one person's approval makes them feel like their own integrity is breaking down. But the cruel yet liberating truth you forget is this: it is mathematically impossible to be loved by everyone. Even the most virtuous, kindest, and most helpful people in history have turned into figures of hate. If you have no problems with anyone, it shows not that you are a wonderful person, but that you are exhibiting a character that cannot stand firm. Because anyone who takes a stand will necessarily have opponents to that stand. You must stop seeing criticism as an attack on your personality. People's opinions about you have more to do with how they perceive the world than who you are. If someone is being rude to you, it is often due to the war within that person, not your inadequacy. By taking it personally, you inject their poison into your own soul. However, Stoics say that an insult from another person can only harm you if you accept it. If someone throws a stone at you and you pick up that stone and put it in your pocket, you carry the weight. But if you leave that stone where it is and continue walking, that burden remains with the person who threw it. The fear of being misunderstood constantly pushes you to explain and prove yourself. But no matter how much you explain, people will only understand you as much as their capacity allows. Compromising yourself just so that others think you are a good person is sacrificing your own reality to polish an imaginary image in someone else's mind. Let people misunderstand you. Let them think you are cold, selfish, or arrogant for setting boundaries. Do not be afraid to be the bad guy in someone else's story. If that role allows you to be the hero of your own story, it is an honor. The habit of seeing yourself through the eyes of others turns you into a beggar, constantly dependent on external approval. Marcus Aurelius asks, "Does the emerald lose its value if it is not praised?" Gold does not rust because someone calls it copper. Your worth is not tied to someone else's appreciation or criticism. As long as you know yourself, the noise outside is just wind. Being afraid of criticism is actually not trusting your own judgment. When you learn to weigh yourself on your own scale, you are not concerned by the wrong measurements on others' scales. From today, thicken your skin. When you hear a criticism, instead of getting defensive or upset, approach it like a scientist. Is there any truth to this criticism? If so, take it as an opportunity for development and correct it. If not, discard it as the speaker's prejudice. Not being loved is not the end of the world. In fact, it is often the beginning of freedom. Because the moment you realize you don't have to ingratiate yourself with anyone is the moment you take your real power into your hands. When you cut the dependence on approval, you will see that criticisms are just piles of words. 8. Don't treat yourself like an enemy. Have you ever wondered why you withhold the endless understanding, patience, and kindness you show to others from yourself? People pleasers are angels to the outside world, but merciless judges to themselves. When a friend makes a mistake, you comfort them by saying it's human nature, but when you make the same mistake, you torment yourself in your mind for days. You overlook the flaws of others, but when you look in the mirror, you only see your shortcomings. This double standard you apply to yourself opens a deep wound in your soul. It is impossible to be peaceful in an inner world where you constantly scold yourself and constantly find yourself inadequate. This self-torment manifests itself even in the simplest moments of daily life. You take the most burnt bread on the table for yourself. You sit in the most uncomfortable chair. You constantly postpone your own needs so others don't wait. You mistake these for humility, but actually, you constantly send this dangerous message to your subconscious. I don't deserve the best. I can wait. I am unimportant. You cannot expect others to give you first-class value while you treat yourself as a second-class person, because a person demands from the world as much as the value they attribute to themselves. Someone who doesn't water their own garden and lets it dry up cannot make flowers bloom in others' gardens. Stoics advocate that a person should be their own friend. Seneca says, "He who is a friend to himself is also a friend to all mankind." But you are acting like your own greatest enemy. That critical voice inside you constantly belittles you. It constantly says, "You should have done better." This voice is the echo of the authorities who forced you to please in the past, and it is time to silence it. Showing compassion to yourself is not a weakness, but the foundation of psychological resilience. How helpful can a healer, who cannot heal their own wounds, be to others? Can someone who is at war with themselves bring peace to the outside world? You must stop seeing yourself as a disposable option. You are the protagonist of this story, not an extra. If the protagonist steps off the stage, the play ends. Therefore, taking care of yourself, resting, and giving yourself the right to make mistakes is not a luxury, but a necessity. Stop saying no to yourself because you cannot say no to others. Try treating yourself for one day as you would treat your favorite friend. Would you tell that friend you are worthless? Would you tell them your needs are not important? You wouldn't. Then do not withhold this kindness from the most important person in your life, yourself. From today, make peace with yourself. Accept your mistakes as a learning process, not as a criminal record. Being kind to yourself is not selfishness. On the contrary, it is building the best version of yourself to offer to the world. When you start respecting yourself, that internal void will be filled, and you will no longer be dependent on the crumbs of approval from others. Because no one can make a person who has their own approval feel worthless. Have mercy on yourself. Because in this life, you are the only person who will be by your side until your last breath. 9. Never apologize for your existence. Has it ever happened to you that when someone bumped into you on the street, you reflexively apologized even though they were the one at fault? Or have you noticed that you start your sentence with, "Excuse me, but," even when ordering from a waiter or asking for something that is rightfully yours? People pleasers carry a deep fear of being a burden in their subconscious. They feel as if the space they occupy in this world, the breath they take, or the slightest thing they ask for is bothering others. Therefore, they constantly try to shrink, become invisible, and be the effortless person. However, constantly apologizing is not courtesy. It is a declaration that you see your own existence as a mistake. This excessive embarrassment turns you into the trimming on the edge of life. When people help you, instead of thanking them, you apologize by saying, "I bothered you too." When you have a question, you start by saying, "I'm disturbing you, but..." These language patterns engrave this message into your mind and the person across from you. I don't really deserve to be here. My needs are a burden, and I am just an excess. Yet you have as much right to take up space in this universe as the person across from you. Your needs, desires, and voice are no less valuable than someone else's. Stoics say that nature creates nothing unnecessarily. You are not a mistake. You are not an excess. You are a necessary part of this great order. People who constantly dedicate themselves to not being a burden suppress their own needs so much that they even forget what they need. It doesn't matter, you decide. Whatever suits you are the most common shields they use. By disregarding their own preferences, they turn into objects that make others' lives easier. But remember, no one respects a doormat. They just step on it and move on. The more you shrink yourself, the more the world squeezes you. When you don't defend your space, that space is occupied. And the saddest part is, when you make yourself invisible, people also start not seeing you. Your presence is taken for granted, and your absence is not noticed. Apologizing is meaningful when a mistake is made. However, apologizing for existing, speaking, being hungry, being sad, or making a request is damaging your own honor. Every unnecessary "I'm sorry" also diminishes the value of the apology you would use for a genuine mistake. Constantly bending and bowing damages your upright posture. Giving up living your own life for the sake of not bothering others is not a noble act, but a tragic erasure. You are not a servant who was born into the world to ensure the comfort of others. From today, tear out that automated "I'm sorry" phrase from your language. When someone waits for you, instead of saying, "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting," say, "Thank you for waiting patiently." When you ask for help, instead of saying, "I bothered you," say, "Thank you for taking the time." Replace embarrassment with gratitude. Even this small change in words will straighten your stance. Lift your head, straighten your shoulders, and own the space you occupy. Because you came to this world not as a squatter but as an owner. Your existence is not a burden, but a gift. You must accept this first. 10. Stop trying to read people's minds. After a conversation ends, do you replay that conversation in your head for hours and question yourself, did I say something wrong? People-pleasing minds are constantly on alert. You generate disaster scenarios from the person across from you raising an eyebrow, not putting an emoji in their message, or a millimeter change in their tone of voice. This social detective work constantly forces you to guess the emotional state of others and position yourself accordingly. But what you forget is this: you are not a psychic, and you cannot read people's minds. What you are doing is not a prediction, but projecting your own fears onto the silence of others. Most of the time, the stagnation of the person across from you has nothing to do with you. Maybe they are tired, maybe they are hungry, or maybe they are just in their own world. But by taking everything personally, you create a problem that doesn't exist. This disease of overanalyzing turns into a black hole that consumes your mental energy. When you start looking for a hidden anger or implication even under a simple, "okay" message, you disconnect from reality. You believe in the scenarios you construct and start defending or apologizing according to those scenarios. Yet the person across from you has no idea what is going on. Stoics say that we should rely only on concrete data. If someone hasn't explicitly told you they are upset, tormenting yourself by assuming they are upset is madness. You must stop seeing uncertainty as a threat. If you don't know what someone is thinking, choose the neutral possibility, not the worst-case scenario. Because a mind that constantly waits on alert can never find peace. Trying to control every micro-mimic of others is actually the result of a deep desire for control. You think, if I understand how they feel early, I can take precautions and prevent them from rejecting me. However, this is an impossible effort. People are complex, and their emotions can change at any moment. You cannot live like a meteorologist trying to predict everyone's weather. Let people feel what they are going to feel. It is not your job to manage, soften, or cheer up their emotions. Your job is to be sure of your own intention and behavior. If your intention is good and your behavior is respectful, the rest is outside your sphere of control. When you abandon this state of mental rumination, the artificial tension in your relationships also disappears. When you stop reading between the lines, you start hearing only what people say. This simplifies life incredibly. Clarity is always superior to assumption. If you genuinely suspect there is a problem, instead of writing a scenario by yourself, ask courageously, "Is something wrong?" Whatever the answer you receive, it is better than the suffocating anxiety created by uncertainty. From today, fire the disaster scenario writer in your mind. When someone treats you coldly, remind yourself that there can be thousands of reasons for it, and the reason is likely not you. The world does not revolve around you. Not every action of people is a message given to you. This realization may hurt your ego, but it frees your soul. When you stop viewing social interactions as a test and start living them just as an experience, you will feel that invisible burden on your shoulders is lifted. Stop mind reading. Start living life. 11. Don't wait for permission from anyone to live. Do you constantly wait for a green light from someone to realize your dreams, your goals, or even your simplest pleasures? Minds programmed to please people, even as adults, still harbor that timid child waiting for permission from their parent inside them. As if they don't have the authority to make decisions about their own lives, they look around for an invisible approval before every step they take. Will they get angry if I do this? Will they support me? Will I be selfish? They spend their lives in a waiting room with these questions. But the painful truth is this: that permission you are waiting for will never come. No one will come and tell you, "You are done making everyone happy. Now it's your turn, go and live." You must take that authority. You must open that door. Not being able to act without the approval of others makes you a spectator of your own life. While you wait in the stands for others to applaud you, the game is played on the field and ends. Waiting for the people around you to see your potential, appreciate you, or pave the way for you is leaving control entirely to external factors. However, Stoics say that the greatest power is to be the master of oneself. A master does not ask permission from his slaves. If this life is yours, the decisions, the risks, and the consequences must also be yours. A life lived for someone else to say "well done" is actually a life not lived. This state of waiting for permission often feeds on the fear that if I succeed, I will overshadow them, or if I am happy, they will be jealous. Dimming your own light does not illuminate the darkness of others. It only traps you in the darkness as well. Blunting your own potential just so your loved ones don't feel inadequate is not a kindness to them. It is a betrayal of yourself. People who truly love you are not afraid of your rise. On the contrary, they are proud of it. Those who try to pull you down or are bothered by your success are the very people you should not be trying to please in the first place. Freedom is the courage to pursue your own truths without giving an account to anyone. You may disappoint some people on this path. Some may declare you selfish. Some may talk behind your back. Let them talk. If your conscience is clear and your compass points to your own values, the noise outside has no importance. Refuse to be a worker in someone else's construction when you can be the architect of your own life. The need for approval is a chain. The moment you break this chain, you will realize you have wings. Make a decision right now. Stop asking anyone for permission. Stop apologizing to anyone for who you are. Stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect time, the perfect approval, that imaginary day when everyone will applaud you. That day won't come, but today is here, and you are alive. As Marcus Aurelius said, stop discussing what a good man should be. Be one. The stage is yours, the microphone is yours, the life is yours. Go out and sing your own song. Thank you for watching.